You really thought you could keep this place hidden from us forever. Mom and I know exactly what you did. This house, the accounts, all of it, we're taking control starting today. You don't get to decide anymore. Sign the papers or watch everything you built get ripped away while the whole family sees who you really are. Cooperate or get out. There's no middle ground left. Hi, my name is Lauren Bennett. I am 30 years old. That was the last conversation I ever had with my older sister. 4 sentences delivered in the middle of my own living room, like she was reading a verdict she had already decided. No warning. No room for questions. Just the sudden vicious announcement that everything I had quietly built was being claimed by the 2 people I had trusted most. The weeks leading up to those words had already felt off-kilter, like the ground was shifting under my feet without anyone admitting it. My older sister had started showing up unannounced, always with my mother in tow, always with some new demand dressed up as concern. They wanted access to my financial records. They wanted to help manage the property I had bought 3 years earlier, before any of this tension existed. They framed it as family unity, as protecting what was ours. I kept telling myself it was temporary stress, that my mother would eventually push back the way she always had when my sister got too controlling. I was wrong. The first real crack appeared on a Tuesday afternoon when I came home from work to find my older sister already inside, using the spare key I had given my mother for emergencies. She was standing at my kitchen island, scrolling through my laptop like she belonged there. When I asked what she was doing, she didn't even look up. Mom said, "You've been stressed." "I'm just making sure the bills are getting paid on time." You know how you get when you're overwhelmed. I felt the words land like small, precise cuts. She had never cared about my bills before. She had never once offered to help with anything that didn't benefit her directly. I walked over and closed the laptop. She finally looked at me then, and the expression on her face was almost amused, like she was waiting to see how far I would let this go. That night, I called my mother, hoping for the calm voice that used to tell my sister to back off when we were kids. Instead, I got a tired sigh and a request to just be reasonable for once. She said my sister was only trying to help because the family needed stability. When I asked what stability required me handing over my bank logins, my mother changed the subject to how hard my sister had been working lately and how I should be more supportive. I hung up feeling like the floor had tilted. The next morning, my older sister sent a group text with both of us and my mother. It contained a link to a shared folder and a single line. "We're moving forward with the new arrangement. Sign by Friday or we file the paperwork ourselves." Inside the folder were documents transferring control of my home's equity and my business accounts into a family trust my sister had apparently created without telling me. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. This wasn't a suggestion. It was a takeover dressed in legal language. My mother had co-signed the message. My older sister had drafted it. And they expected me to comply because I had spent years being the steady one, the one who didn't make scenes. I didn't sign. Instead, I drove to my friend Taylor's apartment across town. Taylor worked in digital security for a bank and had helped me set up encrypted backups for my business years ago. I showed her the documents and the group chat history. She didn't say much at first. She just opened her laptop and started pulling metadata from old family photos my sister had posted over the past year. The timestamps and location data told a story none of us had noticed at the time. My sister had been researching property transfer laws and trust templates months before she ever mentioned helping with my finances. The photos were proof she had been planning this long, before she claimed it was a sudden family decision. Taylor saved everything to a secure drive and told me to get a lawyer immediately. I called Jordan Hale, an attorney a colleague had recommended for business matters. Jordan listened without interrupting while I explained the situation. When I finished, she asked one question. Do you still have the original deed and the purchase records in your name only? I did. I had kept every document in a safety deposit box my sister and mother didn't know existed. Jordan told me to bring copies the next day and to stop communicating with either of them until we had a plan. I drove home that night with my hands shaking on the steering wheel, trying to understand how the two people who were supposed to protect me had become the ones I needed protection from. The next morning, my older sister showed up again, this time with printed copies of the trust documents, and my mother standing behind her like a reluctant shadow. My mother wouldn't meet my eyes. My sister placed the papers on my coffee table and crossed her arms. You're making this harder than it needs to be, she said. Mom's already signed. If you don't, we'll have to involve the court. Nobody wants that. I looked at my mother then. She was staring at the floor, arms wrapped around herself, like she was cold. For a second, I almost felt sorry for her. Then I remembered the group text and the metadata Taylor had shown me. My mother had chosen her side weeks ago. She just hadn't wanted to say it out loud until my sister forced the moment. I told them both to leave. My sister laughed a short, ugly sound. She said I would regret it when the family turned against me. My mother finally looked up, and the expression on her face was worse than anger. It was resignation. She had already decided I was the problem. They left. I locked the door behind them and sat on the floor with my back against it until my legs stopped shaking. Then I called Jordan and told her we were moving forward with whatever legal protection we could file immediately. I also called Taylor and asked her to keep digging through anything else my sister might have left behind in old emails or photos. I needed every piece of evidence I could get because I was starting to understand that this wasn't about money or property anymore. It was about control, and they had already decided I didn't deserve any. The days after that felt like walking through a house where every room had been rearranged while I slept. My mother stopped answering my calls. My older sister sent one more text, short and final. You had your chance. I didn't reply. I spent the evenings at my kitchen table with Jordan's legal pad and Taylor's printed metadata reports, building a timeline of exactly when the plan had shifted from suggestion to demand. Every entry made the same thing clearer. This had never been about family unity. It had been about my sister deciding she was entitled to what I had earned and my mother choosing not to stop her. I kept working my job during the day, showing up to meetings, answering emails, pretending nothing was wrong. At night, the pretense dropped. I would sit in the dark living room of the home I had bought and maintained alone, and wonder how long they had been waiting for the right moment to take it. The silence in the house felt different now. It wasn't peaceful. It was the quiet that comes right before something breaks. The quiet didn't last. 2 days later, my mother called, while I was at my desk trying to focus on a client campaign. Her voice was flat, the kind of tone people use when they've already decided the conversation is over before it starts. I think it would be best if we all sat down and talked like adults, she said. Your sister has some papers she wants you to look at. It doesn't have to be ugly. I asked her if she had read the documents herself. She paused long enough that I knew the answer. Then she said my older sister understood these things better and that I should just come to the house that evening. When I told her I wasn't signing anything without my own lawyer present, the line went silent for a moment. She didn't argue. She just said, "Do what you have to do," and hung up. That was the beginning of the silence. My mother stopped replying to texts after that. My older sister kept messaging, each one shorter and colder than the last. The messages weren't questions anymore. They were instructions. Be at the house at 7. Don't bring anyone. I didn't answer them. Instead, I forwarded every single one to Jordan. Jordan told me to document everything and to stop going to the house alone. She also said something that landed harder than I expected. They're trying to create a paper trail that makes you look unreasonable. Don't give them the chance. I spent the rest of the afternoon on the phone with Taylor, who had spent the night pulling more metadata from old photos and emails my older sister had sent years ago. The pattern was clear now. My sister had been researching family trust templates and property co-ownership laws as far back as the previous winter, long before she ever mentioned helping with my finances. Taylor printed the timeline and the location stamps. She told me to keep the original safe and to bring copies to Jordan. I met Jordan the next morning at her office. She read through the trust papers my sister had left on my coffee table and shook her head. "This is sloppy," she said. "They're trying to claim the house was always meant to be family property, but the purchase records are clean in your name. We can file for an injunction to freeze any attempts to transfer title or access your accounts. It won't stop them from harassing you, but it will protect the asset." I signed the paperwork she needed and left feeling like I had at least one solid wall between me and whatever they were planning next. The relief lasted until I got home and found my older sister's car in the driveway again. She was sitting on the front steps with a manila envelope in her lap. My mother wasn't with her this time. She stood up when I parked. "You're making this a lot harder than it needs to be," she said as I walked toward the door. Her voice was calm, almost pleasant, but the words were sharp enough to cut. "Mom's been crying for 2 days because you won't even talk to her. Do you enjoy hurting her?" I told her to leave. She didn't move. Instead, she held out the envelope. "These are the new documents. We updated them so you can't claim we didn't give you options. Sign them tonight or we file tomorrow morning. Your choice." I didn't take the envelope. I asked her what my mother had actually said about any of this. My older sister smiled the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. She said she's tired of watching you act like the rest of us don't matter. She's tired of you keeping secrets. We all are. That was the moment something inside me shifted from confusion to something colder. I told her I had already spoken to a lawyer and that any further attempts to access my accounts or the property would be documented and reported. She laughed, once short and ugly. "You really think a lawyer is going to save you from your own family? Good luck with that." She dropped the envelope on the step and walked back to her car without looking back. I stood there until the taillights disappeared down the street. Then I picked up the envelope and carried it inside without opening it. I called Jordan immediately. She told me to scan the new papers and send them over, then to change the locks and install a camera on the front door. "They're escalating," she said. "We need to match it." I spent the evening installing the camera myself, hands shaking the whole time. Every small sound outside, made me flinch. When the app finally connected and showed a clear view of the driveway, I sat on the couch and watched the empty screen like it might suddenly fill with people I used to trust. The house felt too big and too quiet at the same time. The next morning, Taylor called before I had even finished my coffee. "I found something else," she said. Her voice was tight. "Your sister posted a photo from inside your house last month. The metadata shows it was taken at 2 in the morning on a Tuesday. You were out of town for work that week. She was in here without you knowing." I felt the floor tilt again. I asked Taylor to send me the photo and the data. When it came through, the image was ordinary enough, just my living room with the lights off. But the timestamp and the fact that my sister had never mentioned being there made my stomach turn. She had been walking through my home while I was gone, taking pictures, planning. I forwarded everything to Jordan. Jordan called back within the hour. "This changes the timeline," she said. "We can argue trespass and bad faith. I'm filing the injunction today. In the meantime, stay away from both of them. If they show up again, call the police and send me the footage." I agreed, but the agreement felt hollow. Staying away was easy. What was harder was the realization that the people I had spent 30 years believing would protect me had been treating my life like something they could simply take when they decided they wanted it. The betrayal wasn't loud anymore. It had settled into something quieter and more permanent. 2 days later, the injunction went through. Jordan emailed me the court order and told me to keep it with me at all times. She also warned me that my older sister and my mother might try to create a scene in public to make me look unstable. Document everything, she repeated. Every text, every visit, every lie they tell other people. We're building a record they can't erase. I spent that afternoon making copies of every message and every metadata report Taylor had given me. I labeled the files and stored them in 3 different places, including a cloud drive Jordan could access if anything happened to me. The process felt mechanical, like I was preparing for a storm I could already see on the horizon. That evening, my mother finally broke the silence with a single text. It was short. "I hope you're happy with what you've done to this family." No question mark. No invitation to talk. Just blame delivered clean and final. I stared at it for a long time before I saved it to the file with everything else. Then I turned my phone off and sat in the dark until the camera app on my laptop showed the driveway was still empty. The next morning, I woke to a notification from the camera. My older sister had come back at dawn. She had stood on the front step for almost 10 minutes, staring at the new lock, before she turned and left without knocking. The footage was grainy in the early light, but her face was clear enough. She looked furious. I sent the clip to Jordan and to Taylor. Taylor replied with one line, "She's not done." I knew she was right. The silence from my mother and the sudden visits from my older sister weren't the end. They were the pause before the next move. I just didn't know yet what that move would be, or how much more of my life they were willing to try to take before they stopped. I kept going to work. I kept answering emails. I kept the camera on and the files backed up. But every time my phone buzzed, I felt the same sharp jolt of dread, wondering if this was the message that would finally make the whole thing explode. The dread was starting to feel familiar, like a second skin I couldn't take off. The dread turned into something sharper the next morning when Jordan called, before I had even finished my first cup of coffee. They filed a petition this morning. She said, her voice steady but clipped. It claims you're mentally unstable and that the property needs to be placed under temporary family oversight for your own protection. It's a Hail Mary move, but it means we have to respond fast. Can you come to my office at 10? I told her I would be there. I didn't ask how they could file something so obviously false. I already knew the answer. My older sister had decided the truth didn't matter if she could make enough noise. My mother had signed whatever was put in front of her. I drove to Jordan's office with the camera footage and every metadata report from Taylor loaded on a flash drive in my bag. The building felt too bright, too normal, like the rest of the world hadn't noticed my life was being picked apart in slow motion. Jordan met me in the conference room. She had already printed the petition and laid it out on the table. The language was careful and cruel, at the same time full of phrases like concerned family members and history of secretive behavior. My older sister's signature was at the bottom. My mother's was right beneath it. Jordan slid a copy toward me. We file our response today. We attach the purchase records, the injunction we already have, and the trespass evidence from the photos. This should get thrown out, but they're forcing us to spend time and money proving what we already know is true. Before I could answer, Taylor walked in carrying a thick folder. She looked tired but determined. I brought the full metadata dump, she said, setting it down. And something else. Your sister has been talking to other people. I pulled some old group chat exports from a cousin who still had them saved. She's been telling relatives you've been hiding money and that you're the reason the family is falling apart. The timestamps line up with when she started researching the trust. Jordan opened the folder and started reading. Her expression didn't change much, but I saw the shift in her posture. She looked up at me after a minute. This is good. It shows pattern and intent. We can use it to argue bad faith. She paused, then added, but it also means this is going to get uglier before it gets better. Are you ready for that? I told her I didn't have a choice. Taylor reached across the table and squeezed my hand once quick and solid. You're not doing this alone, she said. Then she opened her laptop and pulled up one of the family photos my older sister had posted years ago. The metadata was highlighted in red. This one was taken inside your house 6 months before she ever mentioned helping with bills. She was already planning. We were still sitting there when the receptionist knocked and said my older sister and my mother were in the lobby asking to see me. Jordan's face went still. They're not supposed to be here, she said. This is my office, not a public space. She looked at me. Do you want to handle this, or should I send them away? I stood up before I could overthink it. I'll talk to them, but I want you both in the room. Jordan nodded and told the receptionist to bring them back. Taylor closed her laptop, but kept it on the table like a shield. My older sister walked in first, my mother a step behind her. My older sister looked around the conference room like she owned it. I see you've been busy, she said to me, ignoring Jordan and Taylor completely. Hiding behind lawyers now? That's new. Her voice was light, almost teasing, but the edge underneath was vicious. Mom and I just want to talk. We don't need all this paperwork between us. My mother stayed near the door. She wouldn't look at me. Jordan spoke before I could. This is a private meeting. If you have something to say, you can say it through your attorney. Otherwise, you need to leave. My older sister finally glanced at Jordan, then back at me. You really think this is going to work? You think a piece of paper is going to keep us from what's ours? She pulled a folded document from her bag and dropped it on the table. We updated the petition. It includes a request for a full accounting of every dollar you've spent in the last 3 years. If you've been hiding money, we'll find it. Taylor made a small sound, almost a laugh. She opened her laptop again and turned the screen so everyone could see it. The family photo was there, time-stamped with the metadata panel open beside it. This photo was taken inside Lauren's house 6 months before you ever claimed you were worried about her. Taylor said, her voice calm but cutting. You were already in there without permission. The location data doesn't lie. My older sister stared at the screen. For the first time since this started, something like uncertainty crossed her face. Then it hardened again. That doesn't prove anything. You could have faked that. She turned to my mother. Tell them. Tell them she's always been like this, keeping things from us. My mother finally looked up. Her eyes were red, but her voice was steady when she spoke. I just want this to be over, she said, and the words landed like a door closing. She wasn't choosing me. She was choosing the path that required the least fight from her. Your sister thinks this is the only way to keep the family together. I felt the last thread of hope I had been holding onto snap. I looked at my older sister and said the only thing left that mattered. You can file whatever you want. I'm not signing anything. And if you come near my house again, I'll call the police and show them the footage. My voice didn't shake. I was surprised by how steady it sounded. My older sister leaned forward, both hands on the table. Her face was close enough that I could see the anger tightening the skin around her eyes. You're going to regret this, she said, low and vicious. When the whole family sees what you've done, when they realize you chose a piece of paper over us, you're going to be alone, and you'll deserve it. She straightened up, grabbed the document she had dropped, and walked out. My mother followed without a word. The door clicked shut behind them. The room felt too quiet afterward. Jordan broke the silence first. That was recorded, she said, pointing to a small device on the table I hadn't noticed. We have everything. The threat, the admission about the photo, your mother's statement. This helps us. She looked at Taylor. Good work on the metadata. That caught her off guard. Taylor nodded, but she was watching me. You okay? She asked. I wasn't sure how to answer. The part of me that had spent 30 years trying to keep the peace was screaming that I had just burned the last bridge. The other part, the one that had bought the house and built the life I wanted, felt something closer to relief. I told her I would be fine. Then I asked Jordan what happened next. She said we would file the response to the petition by the end of the day and request a hearing. She also said I should consider whether I still wanted to keep the house after all of this. Sometimes the cleanest win is walking away from the thing they're fighting over, she said. It's not fair, but it might be the fastest way to end it. I drove home that afternoon with Taylor following in her car. She helped me check the camera footage and change the Wi-Fi password on the smart locks. We didn't talk much. There wasn't much left to say. When she left, I sat at the kitchen table with the court papers spread out in front of me and tried to imagine what my life would look like if I let them have what they wanted. The image that came back was empty, not peaceful, just empty. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Jordan told me to stay quiet and let the paperwork do the work. I tried. I went to my job, answered emails, pretended the petition wasn't sitting in my email inbox like a bomb with a timer. My coworkers didn't know. My friends outside of Taylor and Jordan didn't know. The only people who knew were the ones who had decided I was the problem. 3 days before the hearing, my older sister showed up at my office. She didn't come inside. She waited in the parking lot until I walked out at the end of the day. I saw her car first, then her standing beside it with her arms crossed. I stopped 10 feet away. "You can still fix this," she said. No greeting. No pretense. Drop the lawyer, sign the papers. We'll tell everyone it was a misunderstanding. Mom will talk to you again. Things can go back to normal. I asked her what normal looked like to her. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Normal is you remembering that family comes first. Normal is you not acting like everything you have is only yours. I told her I was done negotiating. Then I walked to my car and drove away without looking back. In the rearview mirror, I saw her still standing there, watching me leave. The expression on her face was the same one she had worn in the conference room. Fury barely contained. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept checking the camera app, even though the driveway was empty. Every time a car drove past on the street, I felt my chest tighten. The house that had been my sanctuary now felt like a target. Jordan's words about walking away kept circling back. I didn't want to give them what they wanted, but I also didn't want to spend the next year fighting over walls and accounts while they tried to destroy my reputation in every room they entered. The morning of the hearing, I woke up to a text from an unknown number. It was a screenshot of a post my older sister had made in a private family group chat. The post said I had stolen from the family and that I was unstable and dangerous. The comments underneath were from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. People asking if I needed help, if someone should intervene. The post had been up for hours. I forwarded it to Jordan. She called me back within minutes. "This is defamation," she said. "We can add it to the filing? But Lauren, you need to decide right now what you actually want out of this, because they are not going to stop." I sat on the edge of my bed with the phone pressed to my ear and looked around the bedroom I had painted myself. The bed I had bought with my own money. The quiet I had earned after years of building something that was supposed to be mine. The answer came out before I could second guess it. "I want them gone," I said. "I want the legal protection so they can't touch anything. And then I want to sell the house and start over somewhere they can't find me. I'm done fighting for a family that decided I was the enemy the second I said no." Jordan was quiet for a second. Then she said, "Okay. We'll file the additional evidence this morning and request the hearing be moved up. And I'll start the paperwork for putting the house on the market once the injunction is permanent." "You're sure?" I told her I was. The decision felt like stepping off a ledge I had been standing on for months. Scary. Final. But the air on the way down was cleaner than the air I had been breathing while I waited for them to push me. The hearing was short. The judge read the petition, read our response, looked at the metadata reports and the trespass photo and the group chat post, and dismissed their request in less than 20 minutes. My older sister sat on the other side of the courtroom with my mother beside her. Neither of them looked at me when the judge spoke. When it was over, Jordan walked me out. She told me the injunction was now permanent and that any further contact would violate it. I went home that afternoon and started packing boxes. Taylor came over with pizza and helped me label them. We didn't talk about my older sister or my mother. We talked about where I might move, what kind of place I wanted next, how it would feel to wake up somewhere new without the camera app open on my phone. For the first time in months, the dread in my chest had eased into something quieter. Not peace yet, but the beginning of it. 2 weeks later, the house went on the market. I found a small apartment across town with a lease that started the same week the sale was expected to close. I didn't tell anyone in the family where I was going. I changed my number. I blocked every account I could find. The silence that followed wasn't the heavy kind from before. It was empty in a way that felt like space instead of loss. The ironic part came 3 months later after the house had sold, and I was unpacking in the new apartment. Jordan called with an update. The trust my older sister had tried to force through had been built on false information about family assets that didn't exist. The fortune they had been so desperate to protect and claim was mostly smoke. When the court looked closer at their filings, the discrepancies started to pile up. My older sister ended up with legal fees she couldn't pay and a reputation in the family that turned sour fast. My mother stopped speaking to her too, from what Jordan heard through mutual contacts. The people who had tried to take everything from me had managed to lose what little they actually had in the process. I listened to the update without feeling much of anything. No triumph, no satisfaction, just a quiet, detached understanding that the loyalty I had spent my life protecting had been one-sided for a long time. I thanked Jordan and hung up. Then I went back to unpacking the last box, the one with the framed photo of the old house I had taken the day I bought it. I looked at it for a minute, then put it in the drawer of the new nightstand instead of hanging it on the wall. The lesson wasn't that I had won. It was that I had finally stopped waiting for people who had already decided I didn't deserve what I had built. Walking away had cost me the version of family I used to believe in, but it gave me back the version of myself that didn't have to fight to keep what was mine. The freedom didn't feel loud or victorious. It felt like being able to breathe without checking over my shoulder every time a car drove past. I still think about that last conversation in Jordan's office, sometimes the way my older sister's voice had gone low and vicious when she realized the metadata had caught her. I think about my mother standing by the door, choosing silence over standing up for me. The choices they made didn't surprise me anymore. What surprised me was how long I had been willing to keep trying to change their minds. If you were in my place, staring down the people who raised you while they tried to take the life you built, what would you have done? Would you have kept fighting? Or would you have done what I finally did and chosen the quieter, harder path of letting them go? Thank you for listening to my story.